Welcome back, March 8th, 2021. Hope you had a good weekend. I turn over the monologue right here to Steve Moore, who writes, "We are hard-pressed to identify a single redeeming feature in the 600-page stimulus bill that has now passed the Senate and House on a strict party line vote. You've got to hand it to AOC and Bernie. These nutcases actually pulled it off. Some of our friends point to the dollars for vaccine distribution. We don't object to that. Though if we simply let the private sector handle the vaccine program, odds are it would happen faster. The other $1.7 trillion is negative for the economy and jobs. There is nothing in this bill that stimulates the supply side of the economy, that is, the production of goods and services. Only one Republican amendment passed. It was an amendment by Rob Portman to shrink the $400 unemployment bonus to $300 a week. We're glad somebody has been reading economic papers. We estimate this change will reduce the employment losses from 6 to 4 million. Unfortunately, the Democrats also voted to make income benefits non-taxable, giving welfare an advantage over work. An amendment by Todd Young to remove the 15 weeks of paid leave for federal employees who want to take off time for virtual schooling failed on a party line vote. That means every Senate Democrat supports up to $21,000 of paid leave for federal bureaucrats. Most amazing to us is that after the expensive failure of the Obama $830 billion stimulus, the infamous shovel-ready projects stimulus, Democrats have doubled down, actually really tripled down. Their preposterous argument that Obama's policies failed only because he didn't spend enough flies in the face of what the Democrats all promised 12 years ago, which is that we would have 4% growth as far as the eye could see. They never came close. The stimulus was a giant jobs loser. Unemployment then was predicted to hit over 13 million people if we didn't do that stimulus. It predicted under 12 million people would be unemployed if we did do it. We did it, and unemployment hit 14 million people. Thankfully, the economy is prepped for a big recovery in the months ahead due to Trump and the vaccines and the end of the left's economic shutdowns. Biden will no doubt take credit for the spring back to life, but debts and bills have to be paid, and we expect after the drinking binge is over, America will suffer one hell of a hangover. Wait until you see the $1 trillion tax hike coming to pay for that binge. Has any group ever been so heavily rewarded for doing so little? The unions that boycotted our schools and our children for almost an entire year, and in some states the strikes continue, they walk off with a $125 billion payday. How much of this money will come back to the Democrats' coffers and campaign contributions, do you think? Nearly two-thirds of the school districts in the country are now open full-time, and in Florida, they've all been open full-time since August. There's no great mystery or huge expense in opening schools, as Governor DeSantis said the way to open schools is just to open schools. But the teachers' unions took the kids in the big urban districts they control hostage. The 8% of school districts that are still fully closed have denied education to 25% of the country's residents, students. And their Democratic friends were happy to pay a $125 billion ransom, even though the vast majority of it won't even be spent until 2023 or later. Meanwhile, the House version of the spending bill prohibited even 1 penny of this money to go to a private school or a private school teacher. The Senate did a little better, directing $2.75 billion to governors for grants to private schools. So 2% of the funds could go to private schools, even though they serve at least 10% of students. And thousands of private school teachers have been in the classrooms for months, teaching hundreds of thousands of kids. We need school choice now more than ever to ensure that all parents will have real options the next time teachers' unions walk off the job and hold children hostage for a big payday. In other news, sexual harassment charges against executives can sometimes be bogus publicity stunts or rackets to extract money from the accused, but Andrew Cuomo is starting to look like Bill Clinton as he now has a fifth woman who has come forward. Our view is these transgressions, if they happened, rank as petty crimes compared to the nursing home deaths that the governor is responsible for and then covered up. Cuomo is running out of friends. The head of New York State Senate has called on him to resign. That's a Democrat. The Assembly leader, Democrat, says Cuomo must seriously consider whether he can effectively meet the needs of the people of New York. The legislature has stripped Cuomo of his emergency powers, and the Albany Times-Union, the newspaper of New York State's capital region, has called on Cuomo to resign as well over the nursing scandal, writing, quote, "First, Andrew Cuomo hid the truth about deaths of nursing home residents from the public. Then his administration lied about why. Then, pretending to come clean, it lied about why it lied," the newspaper editorialized. No word yet from the New York Times on whether they think it is time for Cuomo to go, and we are still waiting on a statement from the lieutenant governor as well. Now, if I may, from the file of I Show You the Times, Bion Bartning writes of his and his wife's experience at Riverdale Country School in New York, a private elementary and secondary school, tuition $54,000 a year. Bion, who is writing this, is half Mexican and Yaqui Indian. His wife, from the former Soviet Union. He writes of his child's experience, the new curricular focus at the school in the wake of the George Floyd death. He writes, "I became concerned by the emphasis on grievance over gratitude and by the stated goal of turning young children into committed activists. By the end of the unit, one section of the curriculum explains, students will set commitments for rectifying current social ills, such as learning and planning how to carry out anti-racist activism and or social advocacy in their communities. My concerns multiplied when, going off the Pollyanna curriculum, our fourth grade daughter and her 9 and 10-year-old classmates were given, quote, the third chimpanzee for young people, a book intended for middle and high schoolers that covers mature topics such as adultery, self-mutilation, and suicide. After we and other parents argued that it was inappropriate, the teachers backtracked and asked students to return the books, but school administrators didn't want to hear our questions, as less than a week later, including an unrelated email exchange, the head of the school wrote to us the following, quote, I wonder if this might be a good moment to think whether or not this is the best school for you and your family. Being philosophically misaligned is never a very good experience for all concerned, close quote. It took him almost a month to respond to the letter we wrote in reply, explaining that our philosophy hadn't changed and asking if our children were still welcomed at his school. We were confused and upset. We had chosen Riverdale based on its promise to develop character strengths like grit, optimism, and gratitude, to promote open-minded inquiry and critical thinking. How had it, like so many other schools, gone so quickly down this path? While many of us have encountered this intolerant orthodoxy only recently, it debuted on college campuses more than 40 years ago. Sensible people thought it was a joke, or at least that it would remain on campus since it could never survive contact with the real world. That was wrong. Masquerading as anti-racism, this cynical worldview is being spread like a virus by an army of paid consultants and true believers. Few people have been willing to stand up against it. At Riverdale, many parents privately express concerns but aren't willing to speak up. They fear being called racist or worse, losing their coveted spots. The real story here, though, isn't about Riverdale. The kids' school is only one data point. The backward belief system is capturing public and private schools across the country. As Christopher Rufo at City Journal reports, a public school in Cupertino, California forced third graders to rank themselves according to their power and privilege. And the San Diego Unified School District held a training in which white teachers were told that they spirit murder black children and should undergo anti-racist therapy. There are hundreds of examples and countless others that haven't been reported. Millions of American children are being taught to see the world in this racially reductionist way. Almost 70 years after Brown v. Board of Education, there is an urgent need to reaffirm and advance the core principles of the civil rights movement. This isn't an issue of left versus right. The defining question of our time is, how do we break through the demonization and division and find the courage to move forward together as Americans? I have a few ideas. They won't come quickly, though. I'd love to hear yours. Nothing could be more important. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.